What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? Monday Night Football. I just watched it. John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Didn't see this coming when I tried to lay out my predictions on the NFL. Are 6-2 in first place by themselves with a Ravens loss. The New York Giants, I think most people saw this coming after we witnessed Hard Knocks, are 2-6 and headed nowhere fast. So it's a very, very rough season for the Giants, for Brian Daboll. Actually, I think Brian Daboll is actually coaching pretty well, but obviously his team's losing, and the quarterback and the offense continues to sputter. And tonight was one of their better performances of the season. But Russell Wilson, Mike Tomlin, TJ Watt, we'll dive into the Giants. Also going to do a little, the Penthouse, you get some teams that lose. You get booted out of the Penthouse, and there aren't many teams in it right now. And the Outhouse, they got a new addition. They got a new addition, and they might play in New York, and they ain't the Giants. I actually think the Giants actually are a pretty competitive, shitty team. The Jets, I mean, what a disaster. So we will dive into that. There's also was a team that lost 52-14 that has one win, 52-14. Good effort, Tennessee Titans. There was a lot that happened. Anthony Richardson tapped out of a game. Obviously, the Tyrique Stevenson moment in Washington, all-timer. So we'll dive into a bunch of other football talk. But before we dive in, do you want to go to a game? You probably won't have the chance to go to a World Series game because that thing, if you wanted to go to like game 5, 6, or 7, because it looks like there's a pretty good chance that the Yankees are about to get swept. But if you want to go to a football game, I mean, we're basically give or take halfway through the season. So if you live in one of these markets, if you want to travel and see your team, if you want to go to a college game, the NBA is off and running. The National Hockey League is off and running. We got concerts. We got comedy shows. Go enjoy a night out and do it on us. My partners, the official ticketing app, Game Time. Been using them for 2 years now. It doesn't get any easier. Honestly, it's the best app I think I've ever had. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download that Game Time app right now. Create an account and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. I think we got to start this off with a hat tip and a salute and just, an overall thumbs up to Mike Tomlin. Because, one, I think a lot of people that listen definitely to me and Colin when we do our shows, me over the years think I'm like a Tomlin hater. It's impossible to not think Mike Tomlin is a good coach. But we're also, when you go to the playoffs and have a winning record every year, you get compared to the other really good coaches. And he hasn't won a playoff game in a long time. And coming into this season, I thought they were going to be worse. I thought that 9-10 wins of getting in as the 7th seed and being one and done, I thought this would be the year they don't even make the playoffs. I was wrong. At 6-2, they could cruise the second half of the season and go 5-4 and have 11 wins and be a lock wild card team. But it's clear that they have a very, very good chance to win the division. And the move he made 2 weeks ago, as he said, it's why I'm so highly compensated, I thought was insane. Not just because I didn't think Russell Wilson was good anymore, but it was working what they were doing. Playing defense, running Justin Fields, and he saw something that was not sustainable. And we say it all the time, like when guys go from coordinators to head coaches, a lot of you guys listening or watching, I'm sure go in positions where you start managing people, you're in charge, and you realize it's a lot different when you're just giving suggestions than the one making the decisions. And listen, I wasn't alone when I thought, like, you're going to go to Russell Wilson. One, I didn't even believe him. I thought he was messing with the Jets. And then when they go into the locker room with George Pickens on like that Thursday or Friday, and they're trying to be mum about it, he's like, yeah, he's a starting quarterback. We've been working after practice. It was pretty clear, like, yeah, this is happening. And then in that game, started rocky by the end. Clearly, they are a much better passing team. Tonight, though, it was a game changer for them. And he made that decision simply because, and listen, Justin Fields deserves a lot of credit. And he's going to extend his career for a long time. Is he a starting quarterback in this league? It's probably going to be difficult for him to be moving forward. But when you become a backup, two things have to be accounted for. Your character, your work ethic, because a lot of it's not playing. How you are during the week, how you are in practice, how your teammates like him. He has been really impressive in this situation. Because when you get yanked and your team's winning, he could have handled it more poorly, or just not, I mean, poorly in general. He didn't handle it poorly at all. He could have just, I don't know, created a little bit of a stink, had his agent leak some stuff, just been pissed off. And publicly, and it feels like the way he was with Russell Wilson on the sideline tonight, couldn't have handled it any better. That's maturity. That's called being a pro. And we always say, like, not we, but coaches always say, they love saying this, you got to be a pro, you got to be a pro. There's also a human element to this that he was able to kind of shove to the side, keep his head down, be a pro, and it's been really impressive. But they obviously don't have the running element anymore with Russell Wilson. They ran, like a quarterback sweep tonight. My guess is they ran that just to get that on film to keep defenses honest. Russell's not a runner. He got like 3 steps and slid immediately. Like that element that Justin Fields had is gone from their game. But they go, who cares? We want him to throw the ball and throw the ball downfield. And in the first half, they easily should have had a touchdown to George Pickens, who only got the 1 foot down twice. One takeaway I had tonight from that play, which by the letter of the law is the right call. If you get the same foot down 2 separate times before you go out of bounds and your second foot never touches, that should count. Like, if you watch that play, I don't think there's a human alive that goes, that's not a catch. But it wasn't. They had to settle for all these field goals, and it's whatever the score is at halftime, 9-9. The Steelers easily could have been up 17-9 or 17-6 at halftime. Like, they were moving the ball. 43 yards, deep ball to George Pickens. 36 yards, deep ball to Van Jefferson. Little underthrown. I think one thing that's pretty evident, his arm strength in the peak of his powers, the guy that I saw beat the shit out of the Niners in the middle of the 2010s, it's not quite as potent, but it's still pretty good. He hit the touchdown pass to Austin, the little return guy who's dynamic little receiver as well. Freiermuth down the field for a first down for 11 yards. Darnell Washington on a crossing route. He was 20 of 28 for 280 yards. And to me, that ball and that pressure of being able to flip the field with explosive plays was definitely something they didn't really have with Justin Fields. And it would happen every so often, but Russell is not going to pick you apart over the middle of the field. That's always been the knock on him, right? He doesn't like throwing over the middle of the field. And then over the last couple of years, he's become a dink and dunk guy and not willing to push it. And clearly, whatever Tomlin does, which makes him, one of the better coaches of his generation, a guy that everyone in the league respects, and a guy that just never loses. A guy that just never loses. Because you can't tell me, if you take Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, the Giants were sniffing around on Russell Wilson. If you put Russell Wilson on that team, it's just not working. I mean, it's simply not. And it's not exactly like Pittsburgh has the 93 Dallas Cowboys offensive line blocking for him. But you watch it and you go, yeah, I could see this getting a little bit better. And honestly, there were some signs tonight where I said it a week ago. I was like, I don't know if this team can win a playoff game. Then Baltimore loses. And now you go, obviously they don't play each other, I think, for a couple more weeks. And then again toward the end of the season. So if you just handle business there. Now, one curveball for both those two teams is that if you told me that Deshaun Watson, because Baltimore just played Cleveland, Pittsburgh has not played Cleveland yet. So they both still have 3 remaining games. Pittsburgh has 2, and Baltimore has 1 more remaining with Cleveland. If you told me Deshaun Watson was starting all those games, I would say pretty good chance it was a 4-0 sweep by the two teams. Worst case scenario, maybe Cleveland just gets 1 game at home, makes the game weird, some fumbles. Well, that dramatically changed because the Cleveland team you saw yesterday that took out Baltimore, like that's a real team. And that's a team now. Obviously, they beat Baltimore, but like they could beat Pittsburgh as well. And that's something you didn't really have to factor in before because no one took them. Like Deshaun Watson wasn't beating this team the way he was playing early in the season. Rips his Achilles, Jameson bombs away. And it's a tough opponent. So that's something to keep an eye on if you're a Steeler or Raven fan, right? But I just think that this passing element, post Roethlisberger, when they went with the Rudolphs and they went with the Duck Hodges and then a couple years with Kenny Pickett, it was a joke. And Fields, who I think played much better this season than he even did last year when everyone was trying to act like he was a good player, still is very flawed as a passer. And while Russell has things you would like him to be better at, that willingness and that touch on the deep route, on the go route, on just deeper breaking routes, like he will just let it loose. And he's confident letting it rip, even though sometimes it just, and listen, Van Jefferson, make a play on the ball. Obviously, George Pickens with that big body, I don't even care if it's a little underthrown as a 50-50 ball. We'll let our blue chip premium guy go up and make a play. You throw a 50-50 ball to our big-ass tight end that we just extended, okay, we'll live with it. You probably got to be pretty accurate when you're throwing it to Austin, and he was tonight. Hit him in stride. Easy touchdown. So that was an impressive, it's just an impressive organizational little stretch here by Mike Tomlin, by the Steelers, by Russell and Justin Fields. I said this, and I've been hammering this point home because when I went to the combine, it's just so clear. So many of these teams have no fucking shot. It's like, you got no shot. It's got to be incredible if you're an owner of one of these teams because you're going to make money no matter what. Your team can blow. Your team can win 1 or 2 games every year for a decade straight. You get the same check from the league as the Dallas Cowboys, the 49ers, or the Pittsburgh Steelers. It doesn't matter. But there is a reason the same teams consistently compete in the playoffs and have winning records. And obviously Tomlin, the Steelers organization, you watch tonight, like there are certain players that were just born to play for certain teams. And to me, TJ Watt just feels, I mean, obviously he's a Pittsburgh Steeler, but like it's just a match made in heaven. Like that guy was born to play for that brand, to play in front of those fans, and to play on that unit for that organization. You know, it wouldn't have been the same if I was like TJ Watt, even the same level of player, was on like the Jags or the Dolphins, right? It just feels right. And he was an absolute dominant menace tonight. And when they have Highsmith healthy as well, and you got to go into must passing situations, you are fucked. Like you're in major trouble, especially if you're a situation like the Giants where you got backup offensive linemen in. And they ate them alive as the game went on. And the Giants honestly played probably one of their better games of the season. You saw Brian Daboll early on, like the Steelers just look like the Steelers do. That's how they play at 10 a.m. games. That's how they play Sunday night games. That's how they play Thursday night games. Like most of their games look in a similar vein. Now, they were more explosive down the field than in recent memory because of Russell, but the vibe of their game is very similar, right? They get this freak fumble. The Giants fall on it late in the game. It's like, God, the Giants score here. Well, they got to get a 2-point conversion too because they did your classical analytical, you're down 14, you go for 2 when you score, which I totally understand. Unless you're the fucking Giants, you have scored 10 points total in 2 games. Let's just try to tie the game. You struggle to move the ball, let alone score the ball. And then the 2-point play they ran, as Troy Aikman said, was an embarrassment. Tyrique Stevenson says, thanks, guys. You might want to focus up because no one was paying attention on that play. And Malik Neighbors got immediately tackled. You go for two when your offense is terrible. Like, all things are not equal. The Giants are no guarantee to ever gain a yard, especially against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's just go down a touchdown. Maybe something weird happens. We'll tie it up with a touchdown. But of course, you go for two because of the analytics. We're trying to win the game. Win the game. Let's just see if we can tie the game. Like, let's take baby steps. What do they say? You got to crawl, then walk, then run. Like, let's not try to sprint here before you can just take 2 steps moving forward. And, the Steelers, 6-2, very, very impressive. And the Giants, like, you could tell Brian Daboll wanted that. And this is why you always got to be careful when you gamble on, Monday night games, especially as the season goes on, because you will get, I think now I have to relook exactly what the rules are for the flexes, but you will have bad teams play really good teams. And you'll go, oh, this is going to be a blowout. And all of a sudden it'll be the third quarter and it'll be a tie game because these coaches make a ton of money. These players have a lot of pride. Like, they're human beings. They understand playing in a solo game on prime time on Monday night is a big deal. And you get an extra day to prepare, and you usually throw the kitchen sink, not just schematically, but effort-wise. You play harder than you typically do. Sad to say, but it's kind of true. And it felt like early on in that game, the New York Giants, like, God, this is as hard as you've seen them play all season long. Brian Daboll doesn't want to get, regardless of what his record is, doesn't want to get embarrassed on Monday Night Football by a team that's, going to cruise to 11 or 12 wins. And I think this is the hard part about their situation because, like, it's been well reported that they don't want to fire Brian Daboll or Joe Shane. They would like this to work. I think Brian Daboll deserves to get a little time because it kind of hit me tonight watching them play. I think Daniel Jones is by far the worst type athlete and definitely worst type quarterback. Think about this. He looks the part. He's like 6'5". He's a really good athlete. He's like 6'5", 220. He's a good athlete. He's a high character, smart guy, knows all the plays, tough as shit. Teammates like him. So the coaches like him, checks all these boxes. Arms, good, not great. But listen, Alex Smith, we've seen a lot of guys have long careers without howitzers. But then he plays. And you're like, I don't know. Like, I've been watching football long enough to know this doesn't work. And we've been saying that now for years. But there's only one game a week. So then you go back to Tuesday and Wednesday, and he's the first guy in the building. He's studying the hardest. He knows the game plan by Wednesday. He knows all the plays. He knows all the defensive looks. He's helping the other players out. Coaches love him. And then the game starts again. And if Daboll had hair, like myself, he would pull it all out. But we don't, so we can't. So you just go, what the hell am I watching? And it feels like a consistent theme with guys like this. He's just talented enough to constantly tease you and bad enough to constantly lose you games. Now, it's not all his fault, but it's hard to watch Daniel Jones play and go, I don't know. Like, I don't think this really works anywhere. Even the Alex Smith comp, I don't think he could have played like Alex Smith the way Alex did with the 49ers and even early on with the Chiefs. Because he does a lot of things where you just, what the hell was that? So if he ever was going to be a really good player with the skill set that he has, he would be a no mistake guy. He would never make a mistake. And to me, he would be a lot more accurate than he is. And to me, his accuracy is just very, very hit or miss. But I think the Giants, clearly he won't be the quarterback next year. But back to the Daboll thing, okay, you keep him next year. I do think after that Hard Knocks came out, it's hard for anyone that follows football, specifically the Giants fans, to take their general manager seriously. Like, you don't have to have worked in an NFL front office. You don't have to understand the true inner workings of free agency and the draft. If you were just a fan of football, to watch that and go, this doesn't feel right. And I'm not even specifically talking about the Saquon not signing him or signing him. I'm just talking about, like, Daves, what are you thinking? Daves, who do you want? And as someone in the NFL told me, it's like, If that was just for cameras, why would you let that out because it makes you look so bad, not just to the fans, but your other peers in the league? So I think it is fair to say that we have to take the way that he approached that as face value. But here's the problem with firing a GM and keeping the coach, that then you get this new GM to come in. He gives like him a year trial run, and then you're just all out of whack. And watching the Yankee game tonight, obviously they're getting embarrassed right now in the World Series. Did you hear what I just said? In the World Series. And Brian Cashman takes a lot of shit. The Giants fans would sell their left leg to have the level of competence of Brian Cashman running their operation. Look at the New York Mets. They get rid of the owner. They hire, or he sells the team to Steve Cohen, and they just feel like a real operation. The New York Knicks, who for the majority of my adult life have sucked. And then these last couple of years, they get Leon Rose, they get Tibbs, they have this vision, they get Jalen Brunson. Now we'll see if their moves this year pay off, trading for Karl Anthony Towns. But hey, sometimes you take a big swing to take the next step, but we know they're going to be good because it feels like they're really well run. And then you look at the two football teams that owners are completely different. One guy is just very, what I think John Mara, I think very presidential. I think very like country club, just old school. When I think Woody, I just think kind of rich kid, crazy ass nut job. But both guys, wealthy, own very valuable franchises, and they're both in shambles. They're both in shambles. I would say Woody's version is worse when you factor in Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback and Daniel Jones as the Giants quarterback. But what they both have in common is in a league that is just, determined and judged on. You can tell me about your process all day long, and coaches love doing that. I say this all the time. The only reason people were obsessed with Nick Saban's process, because he won 7 national titles. Nick Saban had never won a national title. No one would give a shit about his process. It's results-oriented business. And the results for the two football teams, but I mean, the Giants aren't that much different football-wise than the Jets. It just feels a little bit less maybe disastrous because they don't have this high watermark that everyone expected because they had Aaron Rodgers. The expectations were low because of Daniel Jones. But they're in shambles. And now you look at their division, like, obviously the Cowboys suck. They're still better than the Giants. Now the Commanders have real leadership, have a real coach, have a real GM, have a quarterback. They're only going to get better. And the Eagles, kind of shook off some craziness early in the season. Let's face it, the Eagles have mainly been good for the last 20 years. So, like, they don't win the Super Bowl every year, but for the most part, they're winning double-digit games. And the Giants have fired, gone how many coaches post Tom Coughlin? They're on their 4th, who feels like in a weird way, maybe or maybe not, is fighting for his job now into year 3 after all 3 of the other guys only made it 2 years. So this is a franchise in a lot of turmoil. And we got a front row seat in that Hard Knocks that was pretty embarrassing. Like, I'll promise you this. I just don't think the Steelers, would ever feel like that. It doesn't mean every organization's perfect. Every organization's perfectly buttoned up and knows what they're doing on every single move and gets everything right. And there's not disagreement. But I've never experienced anything like that. As just a fan of football, watching it on TV, having been in these meetings and seen the way these guys talk, that's hard to shake for the GM. So props to the Steelers, props to Mike Tomlin. If you're a Steeler fan, you should be fired up. Team's not just in first place, but you guys play good football. You play Steeler football. Run the fucking ball. Najee Harris looks awesome. And he's someone who I followed since high school. He went to high school 15 minutes away from me where I lived in the Bay Area. Followed his career at Alabama and obviously watched it close. This is the best football he's playing so far in his NFL career. His physicalness, his speed, he looks explosive. Obviously, we know Jaylen Warren kind of brings a little change of pace. How many yards they run for tonight? Almost 170 yards. Najee ran for 114, averaged 6 yards a carry. So if I'm a Steeler fan, I'm feeling pretty good headed to work tomorrow. Let's do a quick my penthouse and my outhouse. Uh, Listen, it doesn't get any better than the crib and the mansion that the Chiefs are living in. Even when they don't play that well, even when they just don't even try that hard, they get the Raiders and they cruise to an easy victory. If it wasn't for a backdoor cover, that's 27-13, easy W for Kansas City. And let's face it, you can nitpick all you want, like, oh, they barely won this game. They shouldn't have won that game. Like, you're going to look up and they're going to be 15-2. And they've added Hopkins, who had 3 catches, or maybe it was 2 catches for 29 yards. And they added Uche today from the New England Patriots. So you had an offensive guy, a defensive guy. You already have a good team. Like, I just have faith just in their whole operation. Now, they are no lock to win the Super Bowl, but the way everything's playing out right now, they're going to get home field. So you can nitpick them all you want. Tell me who's betting against the Chiefs hosting playoff games. And when you're the number 1 seed, you're the only squad that gets the bye. So I've said it from the beginning. They are on scholarship in the nicest penthouse, in the biggest mansion. They are living like fucking kings. You win a game 52-14 when your quarterback throws for less than 100 yards. If you told me this, there was a game in the NFL, because I would believe it in college because a guy could run for like 400 yards and score 6 or 7 touchdowns. In the NFL, I would say it would be borderline statistically impossible because you'd probably need a huge rushing game and then multiple defensive scores. To have a quarterback throw for under 100 yards and win a game 52-14, or just score 52 points, that feels like a statistical anomaly, but it also feels a lot like the Detroit Lions, who, when you lose Hutchinson, you never know like how you're going to shake off that emotional letdown. And listen, they still got to be sniffing around for trades. They still need to make a move. But you lose Jamison Williams to I wish we would just say what they got in trouble for. Like, no one cares. Like, you did a little steroids, a little cocaine, whatever it was. Can you just put what he got suspended for? Was it because he was injured? He was trying to rehab? Like, I don't care. I don't think most people care. But we know you got suspended for PEDs. Like, for what? But you lose them, and then you're like, well, they lose their speed element, and you're looking up, and Gibbs is going 90 yards on a run. It's like, this is even fair. And the Titans we'll get to in a little bit, but props to the Lions, because last year they had one of the greatest seasons in the history of the franchise. And then to come back this season, look like they've looked for most of the year. I know they hit that game against Tampa was weird, but for the most part, God, they've been impressive. I struggled. I could have just left it at that. I really could have, because listen, playing a divisional game with Jameis, like, it sucks to lose that game if you're the Ravens. I don't think that differently of you. I think Cleveland's a very tough place to play. You do have a major, major flaw. Like, your pass defense and your coverage for a team that had one of the best defenses statistically in recent memory last year, a complete defense. Like, you have a problem. And it's like, no matter who you play, you are very, very susceptible. And it creeped its head in last, 2 days ago, and it was a big reason you lost. Now, I understand that Kyle Hamilton should have caught the ball. Well, yeah, even when your guys are given opportunities to make plays, they drop the ball, hit them right in the breadbasket. It was like, and it wasn't even some frozen rope. It was a little lollipop pass. But you lose to Cleveland with Jameis, I got to boot you out. I'm tempted to throw the Bills in there. If we're just doing it on a weekly basis, like, I watched a lot of that Seattle game. It was raining. It was bad weather, and they beat the shit out of Seattle. They destroyed them. Keon Coleman's coming on. The knock on him was like, he can't get open. It's like, yeah, he's like 6'3", throw him up, let him make contested catches. Use Amari Cooper, who didn't do anything in the game. But, I think the question with Amari is, when you say Amari Cooper, I don't really think cold weather. I don't really think inclement weather, tough conditions. Not really his thing. Like DeAndre Hopkins, his style of play should translate well. Amari's, I don't know. You watch James Cook run the ball. We know Sean McDermott's one of the better defensive coaches. You get nervous in these big games with them. They've done stupid stuff, but I'm a believer in the Bills. So they're like poking their head in, screaming at Dan Campbell and Andy Reid. They're the only team that's kind of on the fringe. It's hard with the Packers. They got some quarterback injuries. Minnesota, you're gone. Houston, I'm sorry. Your record's good. I have a bet on you to get the number 1 seed. With your injuries, you lose Diggs now. Nico's already gone. You get the Jets. Hell, you might be 7-2, but you just haven't played that well. So yeah, it's Chiefs just kind of chilling, cruising down the road by themselves, like the 50 Cent meme. When he looks and he smiles and he drives off. The Outhouse. In the summer, if you're at like a concert and you got to go, like the only place to go to the bathroom is the porta potties, and there's that line, and it's like 110 degrees. And if you eat something bad, and it's like I gotta go, and you get in that thing, and probably 75 people have used it over the last day and a half. It reeks. You can't breathe. There's this like shit, humidity, piss mix in the air, and you can't breathe, but you have to go. That to me would be the Panthers. Like, that is Panthers football. They are so bad. They even asked Sean Payton after the game. People can talk shit about Sean Payton all they want. You got to appreciate how he'll just say how he feels. They're like, hey, Sean, your defense is really rolling. He's like, yeah, their offense stinks. That wasn't exactly verbatim what he said, but he's like, yeah, their offense isn't any good. I mean, the Panthers are an abomination. It just doesn't get any worse. Canales, Bryce Young. I watched some highlights of that game today. God, it's the porta potty in the peak of summer. And we all know when you open that door, that little latch, and you're just desperate for some air, some fresh air. And that's the Panthers. I don't even know what to say about the Titans. I love Nashville, getting married in Nashville. Stadium's going to be sweet. They stink. I mean, they stink. They actually aren't that far away from porta potty status. I just like a couple more players on their team. But you lose a game 52-14. It was 35-14 at half. I feel I didn't watch the end of that game, but did Dan Campbell call off the dogs? I mean, that's pretty bad, man. The Panthers and Titans are going nowhere fast. And I think we just got to add this team. The Patriots, they're out. They win a game. Right? Even the Giants, you just watch them play. Like, they're not – I can't compare them to the Titans or the Panthers. But when you lose to the Patriots in a game where you don't have a timeout after the first quarter because you blew all 3 of them on delay of game situations. Someone reminded me of this situation today. I think they had a 10-play drive when they scored to take the lead against the Patriots with, I forget exactly how much time's on the clock. Was it 2:50 or 3 minutes or something? So as you're driving, hey, if we score, you have eyes. You took basic math in elementary, like, well, we need a 2-point conversion. So have a 2-point conversion play called immediately when you score. Or even in the huddle, like, hey, Aaron, if we score here, this is going to be our 2-point play. Get them up in the huddle. Instead, they score, and they've already had a million delay of game situations throughout the game. They get a delay of game on the 2-point conversion. And then when they run the play, they barely make it past the 5-yard line. Aaron Rodgers is a shell of himself. There's just no way around it. And if he was going to be a shell of himself and a bottom, like wherever the middle line is of just the, like the 16th, 15th, 17th quarterback, kind of that range, if he was on the wrong side of that, the Jets were absolutely screwed. And Colin's taken a lot of shit over the years for being critical of Aaron, just with his leadership and some stuff. It's kind of showing. Like, at the end of the day, you're the most important guy here at the moment. Not the coach, not Jeff Ulbrich, who's never been a head coach, not Todd Downing, who's been fired by like 5 different teams. Like, Aaron, can you just lead us to a couple victories? And he's incapable of doing that right now. He really is. He's incapable of doing it. And listen, I've defended him with like no one gives a shit in 2024 about his vaccine status. And most people didn't care at the time beside the media. The darkness retreats and stuff like that stuff gets so overblown. But like, this is a moment like, hey man, can you just kind of rally the fucking troops? Because like, back to what I said about the players didn't care. They didn't care at all. But this is a moment where they got a young team and everyone's kind of looking around. It's like when Tom Brady's like, follow me to freedom, as Charlie Steiner once said. Peyton Manning, when he went to Denver Broncos, kind of just feels like Aaron is like, well, whatever. I'm cool. And the team is just, it's a joke. It really is. Now, they're not as bad as the Panthers or the Titans, but when you factor in how bad that loss is, like, you could put it on equal footing of getting beat 52-14 by the Detroit Lions. Like, losing to the New England Patriots in the fashion in which you lost to them is just borderline, if you're a fan, like, it feels like unforgivable. Like, I can't even look at this team. And then they play Thursday night. I didn't even realize that till this morning. It's like, wait, it's Jets, Texans? They lose to the Texans. I mean, they might as well just buy that whole strip of porta potties. That whole strip of porta potties. Like a Taylor Swift concert is probably the wrong. It'd have to be like a hard rock or like a country concert, not just little girls. Because I would imagine like Taylor Swift, the porta potties probably smell a lot better than some of the concerts I've been to. But that would be the Jets, the whole strip, like the 20 straight porta potties. Does your favorite NBA player have what it takes to be crowned king of the court? Find out at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. DraftKings is offering $1 million a day in bonus bets for the first 10 days of the NBA season. That's $10 million in bonus bets. Here's how to shoot your shot. Opt in and get a daily NBA Profit Boost token. Pick a pregame NBA player prop to boost. If that player leads the league that night in points, plus rebounds, plus assists, you win a share of $1 million in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings app and use code JOHN. That's code JOHN to win a share of $1 million in bonus bets if your player is king of the court. Only on DraftKings. Crown is yours. Okay, let's hit on a couple other things around the NFL. One of the big stories of Monday morning, I missed this exact incident on Sunday night. I saw it at the end after, I recorded with Colin after the afternoon games, and again on the Sunday night games, and then I recorded our own podcast really late. So I didn't see the Tyrique Stevenson viral video, which I would say is the biggest viral video so far of the NFL season. And I do think it'll be pretty tough to top that moment for the young man. Obviously, it was really embarrassing. And it's something that good teams can never tolerate. Now, I'm not some moral high horse guy when it comes to sports. Like, I know what I'm involved in. I'm really not, just in general, in the business world. Like this, we live in a bottom line society, and in football, it's about winning and losing. In business, it's about making fucking money. Like, I'm not one of those media guys. I don't even consider myself a media guy that likes to pound my chest and lecture people on stuff. And I'm not like, it was funny seeing everyone say they should cut the guy. Well, one, he's a starter on one of the better defenses in the league and has been a starter from the moment he was drafted. He's part of the Carolina trade that landed the Panthers' Bryce Young. He's been an excellent player for them. People make mistakes. Now, sometimes our mistakes are worse than others. And for a player, that's about as bad as you get. That jumps the shark on just being an embarrassing moment, on being a moment where the coaches chew your ass out the following week. That comes like the entire city thinks you lost them a football game. Because let's face it, he kind of did. He wasn't paying attention. The ball snapped. He looks. They're already running. His job is to actually, Eberflus said it, to get the guy that caught the ball. Well, he's so discombobulated because the play's already started. He just kind of runs to the scrum, and obviously he ends up tipping the ball to Noah Brown. So it was one of the bigger individual disaster plays you'll ever see from a defensive player. You could argue, given the scenario and the context of the game, that it's a Hail Mary, it's one of the worst NFL plays from an individual you will ever see. But like, you're not cutting this guy. One, if you did cut him, which again, they never would, he would be claimed by 31 teams in the NFL. So the Carolina Panthers, I'm pretty sure they have the worst record. Maybe I don't know. I don't have whoever has it's tiebreaker. There are some obviously 1-win teams. Whoever is top of the waiver wire claim would claim him. He'd be gone. So you're not cutting the guy. But this is a teachable moment. And to me, this is a reflection of your locker room, because that was a game where you were getting outplayed. And if it wasn't for your defense, who was holding this team to field goals, you could have been down like 24-0, because they were kicking your ass. But your defense is playing their balls off. Montez Sweat looks like Lawrence Taylor flying around, chasing Jaden Daniels. I don't know. He feels like, beside like Kyler and Lamar, one of the fastest guys in the league at quarterback. And they're doing everything humanly possible, even though your offense isn't doing crap, to keep you in the game. And then in the fourth quarter, you got Sweat busting off a 55, 60-yard run. You got Caleb pulling plays out of his ass, getting chased around. You got Keenan making plays, DJ Moore making plays, obviously Sweat making plays. Like, those guys did everything to stay locked in, even when times were the toughest, to win you a football game on the road, clearly against a good team. And we lose because of that moment. So you're not going to cut them. And like, having a stern talking to in the office, I don't think that does anything. I think you got to draw a line in the sand to your locker room. This will never be tolerated here. Because there are a lot of guys on this team who are going to be on the team for the foreseeable future. And whether they make the playoffs or not this year, I don't think they're going to. But the game plan over the next several years will be to make the playoffs every year with the talent we have on this roster. And Eberflus, because he's literally coaching for his job, clearly is going to want this guy to play come Sunday. Why? He's playing the Arizona Cardinals, who offensively can be a major, major problem. Well, guess who's not going anywhere? The general manager. And to me, this is an easy BP fastball for the GM to draw a line in the sand, make him inactive for a game, and just show everyone else in that locker room, not only do I appreciate everything you did, what happened on Sunday in Washington will never, ever be tolerated here again. Tyrique Stevenson, he's not going anywhere. He's going to be a part of this team. He's going to obviously really learn from this moment. But like, to me, that's the move. And we'll see what they do. Bench him for a quarter. Like, it's not about that. It's about, because like, bench him for a quarter. How does that change what just happened? To me, it's about letting every young guy on the roster, starting with your quarterback. Like, I want you to know that like, the thing we're building here and what we stand for and what this organization represents in terms of winning culture, what Belichick, what Andy Reid, can you imagine that happening for Dan Campbell, Jim or John Harbaugh, Mike Tomlin? What they would do in that moment with that instance of that individual player? So I think it's an easy one for the Chicago Bears to show their team that that's not okay. And we appreciate everyone that laid it on the line from start to finish in that game, because most of their guys did. They played winning or put themselves in a position to win the game. In the fourth quarter, the Bears definitely played winning football, offensively and defensively. Coaches screwed up with the fullback dive to the offensive lineman. Speaking of locker room, I do think the Colts are in a very precarious situation. Obviously, their quarterback has gone viral throughout the season for, I don't know, not being able to complete passes. And like we learned in Cleveland, when Joe Flacco is on your team, if your quarterback is not playing well, he's better than you, or he's better than that guy and should be starting. We saw in Cleveland, major upgrade. We saw in Indy, he came in, offense looks dramatically better. As we sit here on October 28th, I think it's universally agreed upon that today, Joe Flacco is a better player than Anthony Richardson. But this was another one of those situations yesterday, because I don't have the volume on the game. If I don't pay attention for a play and something happens, you don't really know what happens unless you see it on social media later, or obviously you just watch the highlight shows and you figure out like, wait, Anthony Richardson tapped out of the game for a play. Oh, he was injured or something? Tweaked his shoulder or his hip again? No, he was winded. And I thought about it a lot today because I saw Pat McAfee asking Belichick about it, and I thought about the viral video that from the Netflix quarterback series when the Chiefs are in the playoffs and Mahomes hurts his ankle, and Andy Reid is telling him to go to the locker room with Rick Burkholder, the trainer, and get an X-ray. And Pat is dog cussing him, refusing to go. Matt Nagy comes over, talks to him. The trainer talks to him. And then finally, Eric Bieniemy comes talk to him. And they all tell him, you got to go get an X-ray. And he is just dropping F word every other sentence, refusing to go. And when you watch Lamar, no quarterback I've ever seen runs around more. And I have never thought for 1 second, even when he's played bad and I've been critical of him, like in a playoff game, that he ain't laying it on the line and his competitive character is not elite. So you think of the best quarterbacks. You're playing the AFC if you're the Colts. The best team with the best quarterback has 10 out of 10 competitive character. I would say Lamar Jackson's competitive character, 10 out of 10. Oh, that other team that's 5-2 and going to be probably a 13-14 win team. The Buffalo Bills. I would put Josh Allen's at a 10 out of 10. So three of the better quarterbacks I've seen in my lifetime, when it just comes to physical skills, when it comes to accomplishments, when it comes to ability, and when it comes to competitiveness, you would have to drag those fucking guys off the field to have them miss a play in a big game against a division rival in the second half on 3rd and goal. They wouldn't tap out of the game if there was a pot of gold outside the stadium. So to see Anthony Richardson tap out, I went, do we have to question his competitive character? Is it just simply, well, he's tired, he runs more than some guys? It's like, well, Lamar runs all the time. Kyler runs all the time. And I was talking with some scouts, and one said, John, he's never really played. He was injured in high school. He was injured early in Florida. And his one season at Florida, they went 6-6, so half the games didn't even matter. And then he was injured last year. He's been injured again. And I thought, well, okay, because I do think through experiences, you build up stuff, whether it's confidence, whether it's understanding of your sport, of your craft. I also think once you hit a certain age, there are like innate competitive traits that you either have or you don't. I think a lot of people listening to this, whatever business or industry you're in, whether you have them, the people you work for, you have them. When you're around people that are really, really competitive, financially, obviously in sports, it's about winning and losing. It is something that you cannot mistake or fake. And some people are just a little, I would say, lax when it comes to that. And I do think you have to question how the rest of the locker room, because this gets to the Bears thing. Like, even if I really like Tyrique Stevenson, like, this is our job. We're paid to win these games. And if we don't, if we miss the playoffs, if a new coach comes in, the majority of guys on this roster are not Montez Sweat, Jalen Johnson, and Caleb Williams or DJ Moore. Most guys are fighting for their fucking jobs on a yearly, weekly basis in the NFL. Obviously, if you're a veteran player, once you make week 1, your contract is guaranteed for the rest of the season, but definitely on a weekly or a yearly basis. It's like, we can't afford to lose, guys. And I'm watching the Colts lose that game. His stats were horrendous. I saw someone breaking down, like, some of those were drops. It's like, okay. Like, you don't just become 44% passer on the season because your wide receivers are dropping a lot of balls. He's an inaccurate passer. But it's like, okay, we got a project. We drafted him 4th overall. I can live, like, this is what I went into business with. I cannot live with that competitive character question mark. Because now it's been one thing. Listen, we had durability concerns. We had accuracy concerns. And now the number one concern is like, I've seen so many former players that have said, in all my life of being around football, I have never seen this, ever. Like, it's been universally agreed upon. It never happens. It happens when you're hurt, and usually that guy's kind of limping off or laying on the ground. He tapped out like he's Alvin Kamara or Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry after a 50-yard run. The quarterback and the 5 offensive linemen never come out of the game, ever, if they are not injured. I think if you're a Colts fan, you've tried to rationalize the inaccuracies, the amount he's going to have to grow to be competitive at the highest level. But I think you were hoping, like, hey, everything we hear, high character, people really like him. But now we got competitive question marks. To me, those are non-starters. You don't have a snowball's chance in hell to compete in that conference against the competitive level of guy that you have to play who are already infinitely better players, and that you know to get Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, or Patrick Mahomes out of a game, they would have to have a serious, serious injury. You almost have to chalk it up to a loss. And I saw a headline today that Shane Steichen, I think in a call to the media, said that they're still evaluating who's going to be their starting quarterback. I think the decision was made for you the moment he tapped his helmet. You have to start Joe Flacco now. You got to, whether this guy's out of shape, whatever the deal is, we got to do some soul searching here, because that can never be okay. When Jonathan Taylor, I mean, they got random guys on defense that were playing their ass off in that game. That can't be accepted. Because if it is accepted, listen, a lot of people in the NFL make fun of the Colts because they think Chris Ballard is well liked by a lot of people in the media, and he kind of gets a pass. I don't even know the guy, and I've been pretty optimistic when I talk about him. But if Joe Flacco's not their starting quarterback this year, like, I'm sorry, their organization's a joke. One, I mean, Flacco is just clearly a better player right now. But to that specific incident, I just don't see how his teammates can take him seriously. Last but not least, I think the power of coaching, this is why these guys make so much money, is on full display, really, in college and the pros, every Saturday and Sunday, but nothing more than this Sunday. Like, all I heard coming into the regular season was the Jets. The Jets are the betting favorite to win the AFC East. And my whole thought was, even if you think Rodgers is going to be peak Rodgers, look at their coaching staff. You have to have both. You can have Joe Montana or Tom Brady, but you typically also have to have Bill Belichick or Bill Walsh. Like, Mike Holmgren was a lot better when he had Brett Favre. Andy Reid's been excellent. You give him Patrick Mahomes, like, it's a duo. The head coach in football means so much. And it's like everyone that acts like Sean McDermott, and listen, he's had some devastating losses, but he has a pretty long resume now of being a winner and that organizational philosophy. And currently, if you go to the standings on NFL.com or ESPN.com, they have a gigantic lead, and it's not even Halloween. The Patriots coach clearly is in over his head. The Jets have no coach. And the Dolphins coach is the most overrated coach in recent memory. Like, this division could be over by December 1st. It really could. And the Bills just have to keep playing for seeding purposes. But, like, Sean McDermott and Joe Brady, because this was a team, it's like, oh, they lost these guys. They got rid of their safeties. They traded Stephon Diggs. Watch them play against Seattle. On the road, in the rain, how buttoned up that operation was. The Packers, to me, have just been a revelation this year. Because the reason most of us liked them so much coming into the season, it's like, did you see Jordan Love down the stretch last year? Look, Aaron Rodgers. If this defense is just a little bit better, this team could win the Super Bowl. And then he gets hurt opening night. He gets hurt again yesterday. And it's like, he missed games. They had to start Malik Willis for 2 games. They had to bring Malik Willis yesterday into a game that was tightly contested. And I look today. Malik Willis for Matt LaFleur and that offense is 29 of 39 for 75%, thrown 3 touchdowns and no picks. He's also averaging over 8 yards a carry, and he's ran in another touchdown. Like, that's what coaching is. If you gave the Packers Eberflus and Shane Waldron, there's zero chance they are 6-2. I mean, none. And if you flip-flopped LaFleur and Hafley and those guys with the Bears, I think it's safe to assume that their defense would still be really good. But their offense would be dramatically better. I don't think the Minnesota Vikings roster is that great. Obviously, the receiver is an incredible talent, and Aaron Jones is really good. But now they've lost their left tackle. You look at their defensive pieces, like who's their best defensive player? 40-year-old Harrison Smith? Like sometimes you watch them get pressure, like who are these guys? You're like, well, they drafted this guy in the 4th round 4 years ago. This is not Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter on the squad anymore. But they got Kevin O'Connell and they got Brian Flores. And now I think they're going to come back to earth a little bit more because the left tackle's gone, but I would still expect them to be a 10-win team. I've said this forever about McVay. For them even be in position that if they got everyone back, they would still be alive is an incredible accomplishment. To win that game early on in the season against the 49ers with no wide receivers is one of the crazier things I've ever seen. Because the Niners blew 2 bad games, one to Arizona and one to the Rams. They are not equals. Ultimately, Stafford was thrown to me and you. Kyler still had, James Conner, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison, Dortch, I kind of like. Like, they got guys that keep you on your toes, is why they've had some big comeback victories the last couple of years since Kyler came back. I kept saying, listen, I whiffed on the Saints. They might not win another game. Spencer Rattler is one of the worst players I've ever seen. Might not be all his fault. They're missing offensive linemen. They got wide receiver injuries, but he's god-awful. But look at the Chargers' schedule right now. They won last year. I think they went 5-12. They obviously had the 5th overall pick. They were terrible. They lost a game on Thursday night like 60-20, which is ironic because they ended up hiring that GM who got fired the next day. The Raiders literally got him fired, but this Charger team was an embarrassment to football. Do you know what's going to happen when the season ends this year? The Chargers are going to be in the playoffs. I'm going to read you their schedule. The Chargers this week at the Browns. I like the Chargers. The following week, Titans. I like the Chargers. They get the Bengals at home. Tougher game, but definitely winnable. Ravens loss. At the Falcons, loss. At the Chiefs, loss. Buccaneers, million injuries. Chargers. Broncos, another team that changed their quarterback, brought in their guy, have a bunch of guys on defense that most people don't know that well besides Surtain. Probably going to be a playoff team as well. There's a reason these guys are making $15, $18 million. Because if you got Eberflus and I got Sean Payton or Jim Harbaugh, I have an exponentially better chance to be playing in the middle of January than you do. We both could lose a bad game. We both could win a bad game during the regular season. But over the course of the year, it's advantaged me. And it's why I was always so critical on the Chargers. Like, I like so many of your players. You went from Drew Brees to Phillip Rivers to Justin Herbert. That's pretty damn good. The overwhelming majority of the NFL would have died for that 25-year run. But when you refuse to pay coaches any money, you can't complain about underwhelming and missing the playoffs all the time. And he said, you know what? Screw it. Here, Jim Harbaugh, here's 5 years, $16 million a year. Oh, you want to bring Jesse Minter, who's clearly one of the better defensive coordinators in the league? How much is he going to cost? Well, he's about $3 million. Okay, here's $3 million. How much your total staff going to cost? Dramatically more money than you've ever paid anybody. It's what we got to do. Because you're watching the Chargers, you're watching the Broncos. They're not exactly rolling out superstar players at all these positions. Yet they have good coaches. They have guys that know what they're doing. And they're both going to end up. I feel pretty confident that there's probably like a 75% chance both make the playoffs. I think there's 100% chance one of them makes the playoffs. If I was a betting man, I'd just take Harbaugh and Justin Herbert over Bo Nix. But coaching in this sport really matters. Appreciate everyone listening. Talk to you soon.